Welcome to Dinar Daily. Today, we are examining a topic that has seen a significant surge in discussion across financial forums and among longtime observers of the Middle East. What began as quiet, specialized conversations has evolved into a much broader dialogue. This increase in attention is centered on the nation of Iraq and the structural changes unfolding within its financial system. People from various backgrounds are now asking a common question. Is the Central Bank of Iraq undertaking a new, serious phase of monetary modernization, a process that has been the subject of speculation for more than a decade? The long-running debate over Iraq's economic future has always had distinct sides. For many years, a significant number of onlookers have remained skeptical, pointing to instability and systemic challenges as reasons why substantial change was unlikely. On the other hand, another group has persistently maintained that a comprehensive reform of the country's financial framework was inevitable, merely a matter of time and circumstance. The current moment, however, is being interpreted by many as distinct from previous waves of speculation. This time, the focus is not just on rumors, but on specific verifiable actions, official statements, and structural shifts that are becoming difficult to disregard. The primary catalyst for this renewed attention appears to be the Central Bank of Iraq itself. In recent communications, the institution has begun to publicly and consistently use language centered on key concepts like modernization, alignment with global market standards, and the establishment of a transparent, internationally connected banking system. While these terms may sound like standard bureaucratic language, they function as significant signals within the international financial community. Such phrasing is often interpreted as a nation signaling its intent to move away from a closed or isolated economic model and toward one that can interact more freely and credibly with the global economy. For years, Iraq's financial operations were largely characterized by a tightly controlled system, designed primarily for internal transactions and insulated from many external market forces. The recent steps being reported, however, suggest a deliberate move to integrate with established international financial standards. This process of integration is a fundamental prerequisite for any economy seeking to build foreign investor confidence and normalize its trade relationships. Historical precedents show that nations recovering from conflict or long periods of economic isolation, from post-war Germany to modern-day Vietnam, have all initiated their economic rebirths with similar foundational shifts toward transparency, regulatory compliance, and alignment with global norms. One of the most specific and technical changes being discussed is the central bank's stated intention to move toward a live data-based exchange rate model for financial experts. This is a noteworthy development. It implies a shift away from a static or heavily managed currency peg and toward a system that is more responsive to real-time economic data, trade balances, and market forces. This is the kind of infrastructure that underpins modern, flexible economies. It suggests a serious intent to build a currency system that is not only managed domestically, but is also legible, credible, and functional for international partners, banks, and clearinghouses, fostering a more stable environment. To fully appreciate the context of these discussions, it is helpful to look at the historical trajectory of Iraq's currency. The dinar was not always in the position it is today. Several decades ago, supported by what are acknowledged to be some of the world's most extensive oil reserves and a significant role in regional trade, it held a strong position. However, subsequent decades of conflict, comprehensive international sanctions, and deep-seated instability led to its isolation from the global financial system and a severe erosion of its perceived value and utility on the world stage. What many observers are now watching for is whether the current reforms represent the beginning of a long-term, sustainable rebirth. A crucial component of this potential transformation is the less publicized, foundational work being done to reform the financial sector from within. Reports indicate that the Iraqi government has been engaged in a concerted effort to clean up its banking system. This includes initiatives aimed at cracking down on illegal financial transfers, combating money laundering and introducing stricter, more modern banking regulations. These reforms rarely generate headlines, but they are essential for building the institutional backbone of a credible and stable economy. They are the nuts and bolts that must be in place before any larger-scale modernization can be effective or trusted by the global community. When international investors and institutions evaluate an emerging economy, they look for these specific signals of compliance and structural integrity. The enforcement of financial rules, the strengthening of digital transaction systems, and visible efforts to stabilize the national exchange rate are all markers of a nation's commitment to sound economic management. It is this kind of patient, structural work that analysts suggest makes a sustainable adjustment in a currency's standing possible. This process is distinct from one based purely on speculation or sudden, unsupported announcements, focusing instead on building a foundation of operational trustworthiness. In parallel with these structural reforms, many reports have pointed to a discernible change in the public tone and professional focus of Iraqi policymakers. A new generation of officials is increasingly speaking the language of long-term stability and economic modernization. There is a growing public discourse around the concept of linking the dinar's strength not to political pressures or short-term interventions, but to the tangible underlying national assets. These assets include the country's vast oil and natural gas reserves, its gold holdings, and its growing foreign currency reserves, which have been reported as substantial. This shift in narrative is significant because the value of any currency is ultimately, and perhaps foremost, a measure of trust. If domestic citizens, international trading partners, and global investors trust that a nation's reserve data is accurate and transparent, that its banking system is secure from illicit activity, and that its monetary policy is being managed responsibly, they will be more willing to hold, trade, and invest in its currency with confidence. What appears to be unfolding is a deliberate, methodical process of rebuilding that credibility, one compliant transaction and one transparent report at a time. This has, in turn, fueled an explosion of activity in the online world. Forums and social media groups that have followed this topic for years, often with just a few hundred comments a day, have reportedly seen activity swell to thousands of messages. These communities are actively engaged in attempting to decode the latest official statements from Baghdad. The discussions are filled with attempts to interpret every press release, every new regulation, and every public statement from finance officials, searching for clues about the timing and nature of the next steps in the modernization process within these online spaces. There is also a significant amount of unverified, user-generated content. Some participants claim to have seen screenshots from banking systems that allegedly display unusual rate adjustments. Others report that digital transactions involving the dinar are behaving differently than in the past, suggesting back-end system changes. It is crucial to note that none of these anecdotal claims can be independently verified, and are characteristic of highly speculative environments. However, the sheer intensity of the discussion itself demonstrates a profound and widespread hunger for information and confirmation. Every time the Central Bank of Iraq posts a formal statement or an update to its regulations, it is immediately downloaded, translated, and dissected word by a global audience. This audience includes not just professional traders and economists, but also a large number of everyday individuals, many of whom have held Iraqi dinar for years. This diverse community is watching for any sign that their long-held belief in the country's economic potential is beginning to manifest in official policy. This level of granular attention underscores the high stakes and widespread interest in the situation. It is at this juncture that serious analysts emphasize the need for a grounded perspective. They suggest that what is currently being observed is not just a product of online hype. There are tangible, verifiable reforms in motion. However, they also caution that these changes are part of a slow, complex, and carefully engineered transformation. Iraq's leaders and policymakers appear to understand that true lasting economic reform does not happen through sudden, dramatic announcements. It is, instead, the result of building resilient, transparent, and compliant systems that are designed to last for decades. A prime example of this systemic, long-term build-out is the country's move toward digital banking. For a nation that, only a few years ago, relied almost exclusively on physical cash for nearly all transactions, this is a revolutionary shift. Today, a growing number of Iraqis are gaining access to electronic payment systems, mobile banking applications, and the ability to conduct international financial transfers through formal channels. These changes are not just about convenience. They are about fundamentally strengthening the currency by creating traceable, legitimate, and auditable money flows that global partners and financial institutions can trust. Another key development has been Iraq's active and public relationship with international financial organizations. For months, Iraqi officials have been in dialogue and regular meetings with bodies such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, and various regional economic councils. The stated goal of this engagement is to align Iraq's financial policies and banking regulations with internationally accepted standards. This is not the behavior of a nation content with economic isolation. Rather, it is the deliberate, public action of a nation preparing to re-enter the global market as a fully compliant and recognized participant each time Iraq successfully fulfills another international requirement via the compliance check. A new reporting update or a digital systems audit moves one step closer to achieving this full integration. This methodical step-by-step alignment is what some commentators have begun to describe as a revaluation in motion. This term is not being used to suggest a single, sudden change in a numerical rate. Instead, it is being used to describe the entire, ongoing process of the system adjusting itself toward greater legitimacy, transparency, value, and integration with the global economy. This domestic progress is also happening at a time when the global economy is itself shifting, particularly in ways that heighten the significance of Iraq's reforms. The persistent global push for energy stability and security has placed renewed, strategic attention on major oil-producing nations. With its vast, proven reserves, Iraq is centrally positioned in that geopolitical equation. A stable, economically transparent Iraq is seen by many as a key component of a stable global oil supply. And this reality gives the country a unique form of economic leverage as it negotiates its place on the world stage. Many economic experts believe that once Iraq can definitively prove that its financial systems are transparent, secure, and compliant, the path will be clear for new international trade deals. A significant milestone, they theorize, would be the pricing of its own oil contracts directly in the Iraqi dinar, rather than in US dollars. Should that development occur, the demand for Iraq's currency would organically and substantially rise, as nations would need to acquire dinar to purchase Iraqi oil. This would be a market-driven, sustainable source of currency strength, the kind of organic growth that central banks aim to achieve. Still, it is absolutely crucial to separate documented facts from speculative fantasy. Over the last 2 decades, the conversation around the dinar has been plagued by countless scams that preyed on people's hopes for instant wealth from a sudden currency exchange. These predatory schemes have, in the past, led to significant financial losses for individuals and have created a deep-seated and understandable skepticism. This time, while there is credible evidence of a genuine modernization effort, no one should be operating under the expectation of an overnight miracle. Analysts who study monetary policy and exchange rate adjustments consistently emphasize that these processes, when done responsibly, take time and are often implemented gradually. The most prudent approach for anyone following this story is to stay informed by consuming information from official, primary sources. This includes public statements from the Central Bank of Iraq, official decrees from the Iraqi government, and reports from recognized international financial bodies like the IMF. Patience and a cautious, evidence-based approach are what separate informed observers from emotional speculators. for the Iraqi people themselves. These reforms are about something far more profound than just exchange rate numbers. They are about reclaiming a sense of national pride and asserting sovereign control over their own economic destiny. After many years of relying on external aid, operating under restrictions, and managing a financial system that was largely disconnected from the world, the country is finally taking visible, concrete steps to take charge of its own future. This shift has deep psychological and practical importance for the nation's citizens. The introduction of new banking technology has already begun to yield tangible improvements in daily life for many Iraqis. Small businesses, farmers, and civil servants are experiencing the benefits of a more efficient system. Financial payments that once might have taken weeks to clear are now processing much more rapidly. Government salaries are being distributed more reliably, and tax collection is becoming more efficient and transparent. These may seem like small victories, but they are the essential building blocks of a strong currency. They represent growing domestic confidence. And confidence is the essential first step towards sustainable value. Outside of Iraq, global financial institutions are watching these developments with careful, professional interest. Banks in major financial hubs across Europe, the United States, and Asia are understood to be in an information-gathering phase. They are analyzing Iraq's compliance data, monitoring the stability of its new systems, and likely preparing internal contingency plans for deeper engagement if the reforms continue to progress successfully and prove to be stable over time. This is standard practice for a situation of this magnitude. No major international bank is likely to announce its involvement publicly until the new systems are fully proven and have a track record of stability. But behind the scenes, this quiet phase of due diligence and preparation is a critical part of the process. This is the moment when major players gather the necessary information before the next potential stage of investment and integration begins. When, or if, those institutions decide to act more formally, the ripple effect could be significant, not just for Iraq, but for all neighboring economies that are tied into its trade networks. As speculation and interest have grown around Iraq, another interesting trend has emerged: a renewed interest in other similar discussions, such as those surrounding the Vietnamese dong and the Zimbabwean dollar. These are two other currencies that, like the dinar, have long been undervalued and have been the subject of persistent reform rumors for many years. Some analysts believe that if Iraq successfully manages to modernize and stabilize its currency, it could serve as a powerful blueprint or inspiration for similar modernization efforts in other developing nations. This scenario is what some observers have begun to call a mini financial reset. This concept does not refer to a dramatic, singular global event, but rather to a slow, structural rebalancing. In this view, emerging economies, through disciplined reform and modernization, could systematically claim a fairer and more substantial place in the global marketplace. The psychological impact of a successful Iraqi reform alone could be significant, as it would demonstrate a clear, modern path for how even nations with histories of conflict and instability can rise again through discipline. It is also worth noting that all of this is unfolding within a proto-global context where the world's long-standing dependence on the US dollar is being openly questioned. Mainstream discussions about de-dollarization, the rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and the viability of a multipolar trade system have become commonplace. Iraq's reform process fits neatly within this global trend. By modernizing its own currency framework and strengthening its financial sovereignty, it is positioning itself for a future where nations may increasingly rely on multiple strong currencies for trade, rather than just one dominant reserve. This does not imply the imminent disappearance of the dollar, but it does suggest a future where countries like Iraq could gain significantly more autonomy over their own trade policies and pricing power. It represents a potential shift toward a more balanced global financial ecosystem, and that is precisely why geopolitical analysts, not just financial ones, are paying such close attention. This is about more than just a single currency. It's about the changing architecture of global finance. As markets and individuals continue to process this influx of news, excitement understandably continues to grow. But so does the need for caution and discernment. Even small, technical policy announcements from the Central Bank of Iraq can cause massive waves of speculation online. Social media platforms can light up with bold, unverified claims, screenshots of dubious origin, and highly emotional predictions. For anyone watching this channel, it is vital to remain grounded and focused on the facts. The real, verifiable story is not to be found in those speculative screenshots or anonymous forum posts. The real story is in the slow, patient, and disciplined work that Iraq is doing behind the scenes in the public record. Every successful audit completed, every new compliance report published, and every digital reform implemented is what adds another brick to the wall of credibility. And that credibility, once it is fully earned, does not vanish. It compounds over time, building the foundation for long-term stability inside Iraq. There is a palpable sense of cautious optimism. Ordinary citizens who may have once deeply distrusted their own local banks, preferring to keep their savings in cash, are slowly beginning to open accounts, use mobile payment apps, and participate in the modern economy. This cultural shift toward financial inclusion is, in itself, a historic development for the country. It creates a new culture of accountability where money moves through traceable, legitimate channels instead of the informal black market. Over time, the transparency is what makes the dinar stronger, more stable, and more valuable from the inside out. For those of us wondering what happens next, the coming months will be critical. The Central Bank of Iraq is expected to release further updates on its progress, particularly regarding its digital currency infrastructure and its integration with cross-border payment systems. These technical developments will be key indicators of how close Iraq is to achieving full international integration. Experts predict that as Iraq continues to methodically align its practices with the requirements of the IMF and other global financial bodies, confidence in its currency and its economy will grow naturally. This will likely not be an overnight event. It is far more likely to be a steady, visible, and measurable process. Many longtime followers of this complex story have admitted that they have never before seen this level of genuine, documented progress. It is no longer just talk. There are new laws being passed, public audits being conducted, and tangible international cooperation. The very fact that these moves are being made so openly, rather than through opaque back channels, signals a new commitment to maturity and transparency for those who have believed in Iraq's economic potential from the beginning. This period may feel like a form of validation. For the skeptics, it is, at the very least, undeniable proof that significant change is finally happening, even if it is unfolding more slowly and methodically than some had hoped. If this transformation continues on its current trajectory, Iraq could become one of the most significant economic stories of the next decade. A stable, internationally recognized dinar would be a powerful magnet for foreign investment, which would, in turn, help reduce inflation and strengthen regional trade partnerships. The positive effects would likely extend beyond Iraq's borders. Neighboring countries would also benefit, as a strong and stable Iraq functions as an engine for a stronger and more integrated Middle East economy. This is why major world powers are, for the most part, quietly supportive of these reforms. They understand that financial stability in Iraq is a key component of balancing the entire region. When a nation rises on its own economic strength, it creates a more stable and prosperous environment for everyone connected to it. As the world watches, the energy surrounding the situation feels markedly different this time. It is not the empty, frenetic excitement of unsubstantiated rumors. Instead, it feels more like the steady, powerful heartbeat of genuine progress. Systems are being upgraded, institutions are cooperating, and people are paying close attention. Whether or not a dramatic numerical change appears on a screen tomorrow, one truth seems clear: Iraq's financial future is no longer a distant fantasy. It is being actively built, step by step, in the full light of day. That is what makes this a moment worth our attention. This revaluation in motion is not a single event to wait for. It is a movement to observe. It is a movement that could, over time, redefine how the world sees Iraq and its currency. As you reflect on everything happening, it is worth remembering that history does not always announce itself with fireworks and fanfare. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, through methodical reforms, through patient decisions, and through the collective courage to modernize. Iraq's story right now is one of patience, discipline, and determination. And that is a story worth following.